We appreciate everyone turning up for this awesome Lunch and Learn. And we first wanted to give the mic over to Jim from Prince Perelson. Yes. He sponsored it, his company. They do recruiting, and I've actually worked with him. We've been chatting for a while now, and is a really good, recruiter to work with, not someone that gets super annoying or that you want out of your inbox. And I know a lot of people are looking either for their next thing because they maybe got hit by a layoff or they're just kind of in the market. So I thought it could be good for him to meet all of you. And if anyone's looking, I definitely suggest hitting up Jim. And just want to give him the mic for a second to talk about what they do.
Thanks, Tyler. How many of you here know Prince Perelson? Right over there? Not too many. I'm surprised. I'm sure that if you're developers, I've tried to recruit every one of you at some point in time. And if I'm not connected to you, please connect with me. My partner over there is Portia. We've been with the company, going on 20 years each. We run our IT division. I handle work with developers, CTOs, cloud architects, but our company does everything from admins to light industrial to payroll. In fact, we have a really big finance department. And Tyler brought me in to sponsor, and I love pizza, and I love Tech Talk, so I thought this would be great. If you're looking for a position, if you're looking to hire, please think of me and send me out a LinkedIn invite. I love connecting to local talent.
Thanks again, Jim, for sponsoring. And yeah, if you want to give him a round of applause, thank you for the pizza. And please do connect with Jim and the community in general. If people need help finding jobs, I do think that's something that we can help with and try to make connections. So please use the time. You've got time after lunch as well to chat, network, and get to know some of the people in the community. With that being said, we've got a great Lunch and Learn. We've got John Daniels here. John and I know each other probably too well, more than you'd like. But he is one of the nicest and most talented engineers that I've ever worked with. They started their company a few months ago, I think late last year, called Chief. They're working on basically AI operations. So it connects into things like your customer support, your sales, your marketing. So a lot of you, if you know different businesses working at, know those can be quite hard things to automate, and AI is making a lot of advancements that can really move things forward in new ways. So I'm excited to see what they've got cooking, and we'll pass it over to John.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks for the warm introduction. Give me 1 second, folks, to get set up here. All right. Did I move the plant in the wrong spot? That's what I need to know. Thanks for everyone for coming out. Let me just walk through a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. So we want to talk about how we can get AI to work for you. We think of SaaS businesses like a revenue factory. And what I mean by that is we think every single department is manufactured to take inputs and to produce outcomes on the other side. So whatever those inputs are, there's some function that happens in between, which is basically your business model, your business processes, and then there are outputs that come out the other side. We very much think of it like a revenue factory and a manufacturing line. The question is, and this is mostly because of our target audience that we market to, do you know what levers to pull for your SaaS business? So are we good on the sound? Is that good? Okay, great. Do you know what levers to pull for your SaaS business? I want to talk through something that happened probably about a decade ago. So when I first got into data science or machine learning, at the time the big AI was what we call classical AI nowadays. And we were really focused on answering these 4 questions. What happened? Why did it happen? What will happen, and how can it happen again? And you can see that this kind of takes you along this information journey where you're looking at things that happened in the past, or as the chart here calls it, like hindsight, to where you move to insight on what's happening in the present, and you can look at foresight. And machine learning models are really good at optimizing processes, especially when they know what those inputs and outputs are and what the different levers or nodes inside of your, call it business operations, can be. One thing that I want to convince you of today is that only a few things have changed, right? One, it's really AI, right? And what I mean by AI is generative AI, specifically large language models. I was having this conversation with my co-founder. I said, this is the same thing that happened in 2016, right before like BERT models became a thing with transformers. And his response was, yes, but LLMs are much more approachable to the average person. And for me, that kind of hit me. I had an aha moment, and I realized, oh, he's right. LLMs are a pure function. They take text in, and they spit text out. And as we've seen, that creates a lot of really powerful things that you can do with LLMs. So that's the first thing that's changed. The second thing that's changed, I would argue, is people's attitude towards it, which is how seriously you take it. Okay, so there's 3 things that I really want to talk about today, and I want to kind of give these away as like little nuggets that we've seen as we've implemented AI for our customers. Number 1, I would highly recommend you connect and clean all of your data to your AI systems. Number 2, map and model your business processes. And then number 3, make it easy to integrate AI and use it for your employees or your customers or whoever your stakeholders are. What I mean by that is integrate it with your existing tools. So we'll walk through examples of what this looks like and how we think about it at Chief. But those 3 things are really the things that I would say. So my goal here today, I'm quoting myself, is basically first, I want you to take it seriously. And second, AI is so accessible. Those are probably the 2 biggest things that I want to convince you of today. I couldn't find a good quote, so I just quoted myself. But all right, first let's talk about connecting and cleaning your data. I love this quote from Yogi Berra, or at least it's attributed to Yogi Berra. He says, we're lost, but we're making great time. I don't know if you've ever sat in a business meeting and you've heard the marketing team argue with the sales team about how many MQLs or marketing qualified leads they produced. And the sales team is saying, no, we don't accept those marketing qualified leads until whatever, right? Certain things happen. Well, if you don't have a system of record where you're even recording that, you won't have any clue of whether or not the leads that you're producing for your business are good or bad or horrible or amazing. So tracking that and connecting that data to your systems is critical. The second thing in this connecting your data that we know about is that machine learning models, in particular LLMs, are very data hungry. So over here on the left, you'll see this chart. This is really a snapshot of the fine wine data set. This is an open source data set of folks who have scoured the web. So if you're not familiar with the fine wine data set, it's available on Hugging Face, and they have this really cool graph you can go through and see, like basically get a sense, an intuitive sense for how LLMs, in particular models like ChatGPT or GPT-2 or GPT-3 have been trained. And basically what this data set is doing is gathering roughly 44 terabytes of data where they're scouring the web. And the types of data that they're putting into this model, the reason they call it fine wine, is basically a curated list. And on that website, you'll find things like, oh, don't use these websites to train your LLM. Only use these websites. And you kind of see this curated list here, which is really interesting. So again, this illustrates that point of basically making sure that the data that you feed into your models, whether it's a large language model or a machine learning model, is clean. And then the second thing is making sure that you're connecting all of that data, however much of it that you have available, that you're able to just throw it in there. The second process is this. So mapping and modeling your business. There's a gentleman that I really like. His name is Abi, and everything that we're going to talk about here, there's nothing here that's revolutionary. The thing that's revolutionary is how serious we take it. And so with that, I want to just introduce you to this idea of the revenue factory. Most businesses, in particular SaaS businesses, model themselves or think of themselves like a revenue factory, where they have raw materials that go in one side of the factory and cash comes out the other side, right? You might think of it, if you've ever been in one of those executive meetings, they're identifying how much revenue or how much capital to reinvest into the marketing funnel. Where should we put more of our marketing dollars? Which channel should we market that into? Is it our LinkedIn campaign? Is it our Facebook campaign? Is it a LinkedIn campaign in this specific area? Or is it somewhere else? And really that function inside of it becomes your business processes. And mapping those things is the thing that makes the biggest difference in our experience. So a lot of times, especially in a SaaS business, you'll see that it kind of borrows from the game of baseball. In order to close a deal with a SaaS business, and this is part of the reason why we're starting with SaaS businesses, is that in order to close a deal with a B2B SaaS business, typically you have to see a demo of the product. And before you can see a demo of the product, you have to have spoken to typically some other person, like a sales rep or something along those lines. So it allows itself to be modeled kind of like the game of baseball with conditional probabilities. In order to get to third base, you have to touch second base. In order to get to second base, you have to touch first. In order to get to first base, right, you have to be up for bat, and so on and so forth. So modeling your business in this fashion allows itself to be modeled with some very simple, I'll call it statistics in this case. So let's say that our conversion rate between our marketing team and our sales team is 35%. And then the conversion rate from marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead, SQLs, is 40% or 25%. And then from SQLs to an opportunity, and then from an opportunity to a closed deal is 30%. So you can see that the math works out there where I'm just compounding all those probabilities together. So if I'm trying to figure out when I'm going to hit my sales quota, it's basically going to become, I need to get roughly 95 leads to get one expected closed deal. And there's lots of these micro processes that you can use throughout your business that allow you to basically put those, a lot of times they get baked in and turned into heuristics or like rules of thumb. Like if one company that we worked with, they did a study on their sales team and they said, what is the most common denominator for sales teams that for our sales reps that close deals the most? And the common denominator was each of those reps have at least 9 meetings on their calendar when they start the week. So there's simple rules like this that make it really powerful for business. Let's take this one step further. So if I map a business and the function of that business is this business process that basically takes leads, lifetime value of a customer, and retention, and in this case, I'm subtracting the cost of goods sold, right? So I'll have those metrics, the relationships between those metrics, and then the weights of what those metrics are and how they affect them, whether they're positive or negative. So for those of you that like math, this might look like a familiar formula for you. For those of you that don't, I drew some nice little levers on top. Basically, any business leader, what they're trying to figure out is which of these levers can I and should I pull to affect the outcome that I'm trying to reach. And in most cases, most B2B SaaS or businesses are trying to grow revenue or grow profit, right? So they're obviously going to be trying to adjust the weights down on cost of goods sold. They're going to be messing with the relationships between your lifetime value and your customer retention or the leads, right? And this example can literally go in a recursive fashion through each business process and each sub-business process and so on and so forth. And that's what makes it so powerful. And you kind of zoom out. You see, so like for a typical SaaS business, you'll have this revenue factory. We call it kind of the SaaS manufacturing line, right? So I go from product and engineering, where they're producing a product that can then be marketed and sold, to marketing and sales, which then someone in customer success onboards them. The folks in support are there to support and make sure that they're having a great experience. Finally, finance and accounting and your general admin are making sure that all those cogs and wheels keep spinning in the right direction. But again, I just want to illustrate like how this is a very powerful way to think about your business, and taking it seriously is one thing that you can do that really increases the power of how you're able to operationalize AI for your business. All right, let's go on to the last part here. So integrating AI with existing systems. One thing that I absolutely love is this quote from James Clear. He says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And I think that is so, so true. So if you already have a natural workflow that you do, you Slack someone on Monday at 9 a.m., and you're giving them your update for whatever your past week metrics were that you were responsible for, or you're checking in at Tuesday afternoon with your, I don't know, engineering team or sales team, whatever those processes are that you have in place, you're going to habitually fall to whatever that system is, whatever that marker is that your manager or yourself is setting yourself to, whatever that habit is that you've created, it's going to become something that you do on a repeated basis. So our recommendation here is to make it easy to do the right thing. What I mean by that is embracing AI by reducing the friction is going to have some dramatic increase. So one example as an engineering leader, it's really not a matter of if your engineers are using AI to get their work done. It's a matter of how well they're doing it and how well you embrace it as an engineer. So like one thing that conversation I've had with my co-founder is engineers are going to be using it, and we want to encourage that. Right, so in an engineer, we'll submit what's called a pull request, which is really, I've written some code, I need someone else to review it. I don't care how long it takes my engineers to write that code. I don't care about how they got to the answer. What I care about is that it's meeting the requirements for the functionality that we're producing, and that that engineer is responsible and holding themselves responsible. I believe there's going to be a future state where you'll actually have, as a result of AI, more engineers, not less. And I think that's a little bit of a hot take for what's out there. We're already seeing it with the advent of prompt engineering and simple things that people are doing and other tools that have been created that make that engineering cycle faster and faster. So my point here is basically to embrace it and to make it something that is common and accepted. For some reason, there's been this stigma of like, oh, I used AI to generate this. Like, oh, well, you didn't put a lot of effort into it. Well, actually, I took the time to map out the processes that I wanted it to have me follow and help me review my code and come up with a plan before I went through it, right? That would be like a responsible and I believe a right way to use AI to get your work done if you're, for example, like an engineer, a software engineer in this case. All right, let me show you a demo of how we think about this at Chief and how we've instantiated this into our product. So to be clear, what you're watching is a slide deck presentation that's a demo of our product. And in traditional startup fashion, when I was getting this slide deck ready last night, part of our systems went down. So I'll check at the end of this, and if some of the systems are back up, I might give you a live demo and show you kind of what we do at Chief. So connecting all your data, we make it super, super easy. By the way, this is a shameless plug for our product and our services, but I want to show you how we think about it. Okay, so we support roughly 212 different integrations, and mostly we sell what we call the customer success and sales data analyst package. So we think of ourselves as like a chief of staff for each of your departments. In this case, we're showing how you connect your QuickBooks data, your Salesforce data, and Gong, which is a popular tool if you're a salesperson making sales calls to B2B software applications. With that, Chief is going to start producing some insights. So in this case, we're showing an insight where Bill, who's an SDR or a sales development rep, his job is to call and set appointments. That's what his job is. And then Catherine is getting these insights about Bill's performance in this case, right? So this is one of those sub-processes of the sales department. So in this case, it's Bill's pipeline coverage has dropped 4 times below quota. Based on his average sales cycle of 72 days, deal size of $23,000, and his close rate of 37%, he's expected to miss his quota by 18%. Given Bill's historical data, Bill's most effective form of prospecting is cold calling. By increasing the calls to 80 a day for the next 3 weeks, he should be able to increase his pipeline enough to hit the quota. Do you want to assign this as an action item to Bill? Catherine says yes. Great. Generates a little message congratulating Bill for the deal that he closed with Meta last week, and then asks him if they like this message or not. Catherine can copy paste that, send it to Bill. Bill says, great, thanks for the feedback, I'm on it. That insight then gets saved in the application database, and we have a little dashboard that shows how many calls per day Bill is supposed to be tracked against. You can see a list of all the team members on Catherine's team and how each of their sub-processes that they're responsible for are required to hit their quotas, whatever that might be. It could be an activity quota, it could be the actual sales quota. Below that, one common thing that we noticed is that sales reps are commonly asked to put in the notes from their conversations that they've had. So we'll track those types of things as well. Okay, so with that, this is a screenshot that I took this morning of an example where we integrate with a tool that many of you know, Slack, and we have a chatbot that sits inside of your Slack application, again, trying to meet our customers where they are. A lot of our customers gave us feedback that they like the idea of not having to install or manage yet another application. So we'll ask it a question. Say, hey, what are my most recent sales opportunities for my pipeline? And this is a list of our actual HubSpot integration and some of the data that we're pulling here. So with that, there's the wrap up to my demo. Of course, it wouldn't be an AI talk unless I closed with something from AI. So I asked ChatGPT how I could close my talk with a big bang. And this is what it came up with. And I said, okay, that's interesting. It's got some of the things about data and revenue. Quote from James Clear, 1% better, customer. I don't know why it's spelling efficiencies that way, but it is. I said, that's interesting. Let's go a little bit bigger. And so this is what it came up with. It takes the revenue factory to a new level. And you can kind of see like this forge, iron forge going nuts. I said, well, that's cool, but let's see what happens if I ask it to go even bigger. So we get this hyperspace, I don't even know what to call it, where the revenue factory, the future, and it's going nuts. Then I asked it again, like, well, let's see what it looks like if I go even bigger. And for some reason, the bigger I ask it to go, the more space and galaxies we get. To finalize it, I said, all right, this is awesome, but give me the best, like biggest, grandest finish of all. And so we end with this Gandalf-looking wizard controlling the cosmic universe, and you can see the revenue factory has now crumbled along the side, and Legolas is guiding him in this creation of some mad new world. So with that, I just want to summarize kind of the 3 principles that we've talked about, things that we've seen with our customers that make it really easy to take advantage of AI. 1, connect all and as much of your data as you can. 2, make sure that data is clean. On the second bullet point here, map and model your business processes. Being clear is being kind. If a human employee doesn't know what's expected of them when they show up every day, good luck trying to get an AI bot to figure it out, right? The more clear your steps are, the more clear your business processes are mapped out, and you can take it to the recursive, most extreme example, as we walked through one example today. But we found that the more clear businesses' processes are with the customers that we onboard, the easier it is to get the AI to do what they're expecting it to do. The final and third step, make it easy. Integrate with your existing systems. Thanks for coming, everyone. 2 plugs here. We're hiring AI ML engineers. If you'd like to, you can apply at careers@getchief.com. And then we're accepting our next cohort of customers on March 14th. So if you'd like to be part of that, or you know someone who you think would be a good fit, sign up at getchief.com. Thanks for coming.
Okay, you're not going to get away that easily. So questions from the audience that we can ask John.
I didn't pay for the pizza, so don't feel obligated. No.
Interesting with your AI. You put a quote, we're lost, but we're making great time.
Yeah.
And it felt like your example at the end was AI being lost, but making great time. You know, it wasn't really going after what you were going for, but making it bigger each time. Was that on purpose?
I didn't see it that way, so probably not. But if you took it that way, then that was probably a miss on my part. But yeah, I think I love that quote because I think it illustrates a lot of time as leaders, you're expecting your employees to hit a certain mark, but you're not being really clear about what that mark is. And then you're not even measuring it to see and identify where that mark is. So I think that's kind of the intention of where it goes. You're like, are we going in the right direction? There's this common thing, at least in engineering groups, like how is the engineering team's velocity? Well, engineering teams velocity is made up of 2 parts. One is speed and one is direction, right? So I could be traveling at 50 miles an hour, but if I haven't set the right direction, it doesn't actually matter how fast I'm getting there because I don't know where I'm going. So that was kind of the point I was trying to make. Yeah, go ahead.
I really liked your presentation and talking a lot about systems and focusing on refining these processes.
Thanks.
I feel like there's going to be a huge bubble of AI agents that are out that people can pick from. And you mentioned when you're working with engineers that focusing on, like, you're not worried about the time it takes for them to get the outcomes. And I get that because people are they figure it out. But I feel like with AI agents, is there a way that you've been able to grade different agents? Because I think grading by the outcomes would be obviously great, but
Yes.
there comes a point where you have to look at the process and the system and say,
Yep.
is this what we want to keep using?
Yeah, that's a great point. Our system we haven't built that to that point where it's grading the outcomes or measuring them. That's definitely something that's on the roadmap. But you make a great point. So machine learning models or LLMs or agents in general, they do really, really well with accurately labeled examples. So if it's completed whatever the outcome is and you've basically given it a thumbs up, like, yes, that's correct, the more of those examples that you can feed it, the more it's able to pattern match and figure out, well, what did I do to get to this point? So yeah, I think that is something that I would say is very critical and a critical part in cleaning your data and going back and labeling those examples of when it got something right. It's really interesting and kind of eerie because it mimics humans. Like if I teach a junior engineer or an intern, like, or even a senior engineer, like, this is the behavior that's expected, and they're meeting that, and I'm giving them that feedback, right? That's great, that's great. No, that was off a little bit, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Like, obviously, you're gonna be able to learn faster. Yeah, great question.
Could I also ask a follow-up question? Also, with like your formula, right, it shows that there are different processes in that context. Have you had problems integrating different AI agents with each other, or is it preferred that you have a larger system?
Yeah, so what we found is our best customer base that we integrate the most with, that we integrate the best with, they're typically at like 5 million in revenue, annual recurring revenue and higher, because they typically have just enough people to where the processes are getting to a point where they want to scale, but they're not quite sure. If they're smaller than that, typically the original founder is able to, he or she knows like what's happening in the business on a day-to-day basis. It's not hard to get on a Zoom call with 4 employees and just do a daily stand-up and figure out exactly the state of the business. Like, how many calls did you make? Okay, great. How's the code coming? And okay, great. How are the designs coming? Stuff like that. And then at the larger companies, what we have found that's really interesting, the thing that slows us up the most is actually, I'll call it like kind of these bureaucratic processes of like getting approval from the IT department or getting through the SOC 2 security questionnaire or something along those lines. So yeah, great question.
Thank you for doing this today. Thank you for the pizza, and I'm thanking Heather for the pizza.
Yeah, don't thank me.
I'm sorry, Prince Perelson for the pizza. Thanks. I love the demo with Salesforce and QuickBooks and Gong, 3 systems who typically don't really integrate well together. So what got my attention was perhaps leveraging AI to replace some iPaaS functionality. Do you see that in the future? Do you see what that looks like? And I got just to qualify that.
Yeah.
Connect and clean your data, map and model processes. Those 2 things have been around for 30, 40 years
Yes.
to make these things work in any scenario. So how is it different now?
Like I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, my point is that it's not different.
Yeah.
It's the same. The one thing that's different, I think, in my opinion, is how easy and accessible AI is through the advent of LLMs. It's a pure function. I throw text in and I get text back out, right? And what's interesting is we're dealing with these stochastic processes, and we're very used to dealing with deterministic processes, right? And it is very analogous to like working with humans in the sense, because you ask a human to do something and they don't always do it exactly that right way, and sometimes it's a feature, like you like it, and sometimes it's a fault. You're like, no, I didn't like that, right? But to your point, I actually don't see those types of systems going away. What I do see happening is an extra level of energy, or I'll call it like due diligence, to make sure that those systems are, 1, connected, and 2, monitored and cleaned on a regular basis. So it's almost like an extra level of enthusiasm, because more and more people can use it, and you're starting to find that more and more people are gaining leverage by having those systems in place.
Thanks.
We're just passing it down to the left, so you're ready, Ryan? Thanks again for the pizza. This is fantastic. I learned so much from this, and one of the things I think about is like what problem this is trying to solve. And one of the things I see is like there are so many point solutions. There's so many tools that we can can reach out and grab. This seems like one of the things that kind of pulls together several into one. I really like that. Looking at a little bit of a bigger picture. And what I was curious about is your onboarding process. Like, I think whenever someone's like, oh, like I'm having to pay for machine learning engineers, like, oh no, this is going to be 6, 12, 18 months,
Yep.
and it's gonna cost me $1 million just to get on the platform and all this stuff. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the onboarding process is something that we're continuously iterating. One of the things I don't think I did a good job, and we need to do a better job of selling, is we are effectively taking that headache of that whole process out, right? Or trying to, I should say. It's not completely gone. So like one of the things that we'll do after a customer is onboarded and we get their data, it takes us roughly 24 to 48 hours to fully sync, call it their Salesforce or their HubSpot system, right? Or it could be a Zendesk system or whatever. Once that syncing process is complete, they'll start getting their first set of insights. And then we have to go through this next process, like on week number 2 of the onboarding, is basically like, okay, it's time to reconcile like the books. Because the data that we have, they'll always get 1 or 2 insights that they're like, yes, that's correct. And then they'll always get 1 or 2 insights where they're like, I don't know what that means, or that doesn't seem right, and they perceive it to be wrong. And there's usually a reconciliation process that we do where we go through and identify, well, why did you think it was wrong? And they'll point to a dashboard they have in Salesforce. I'm like, okay, well, show me how many filters you've got on that. And there's usually 2 or 3 filters they've got there. And when they remove those 2 or 3 filters, we find out that it's the same. So I said, okay, let's ask the question again, but ask it with effectively like those 2 or 3 filters as if you were asking it with that. So that process, I would say, is probably the hardest thing that you're doing in an onboarding process. And actually, I wouldn't even say, you could argue that that's like a machine learning process. It's really more of a data engineering process. You're really just trying to make sure that the data that was in point A or system A has been correctly and accurately accounted for in system B. So hopefully that answers your question.
Any other questions? I have a question for you, John. So,
Yeah.
Because you're on the cusp of all this, the agencies and stuff, what are you seeing as the biggest challenge that organizations have implementing something like this?
Honestly, the biggest challenge that organizations have is they have a hard time believing how dirty their data is. That is the hardest thing to swallow. And like, I'll go through that process like I mentioned, and like, well, it's just a filter here, a filter there. And then we'll get the same answer that they're getting in whatever dashboard system they have or whatever their data analyst has calculated. And then you find out that, there was 200, entries on the specific date that all have the same open and close date for a sales opportunity. And you're like, well, tell me about that. That's throwing your average off dramatically. Why did that happen? Oh, that's the day that we transferred from Salesforce to HubSpot. And rather than, accurately dumping the data in, we were dealing with this problem. So these 200 records just got thrown in with the same open close date. Like, that'd be great if all sales rep could open and close an opportunity the same day. That was, call it 50K, but that's not real. So I think that's probably one of the hardest things that I've seen folks deal with. I think the second thing is I'm surprised at how some folks are really intimidated by it, and they think of it as this like magical thing. And what I mean by that is kind of 2 things. They think of AI as some magical thing. It's just a stochastic process, a pure function model. The second thing that they think of is they think of data. I've learned that there's kind of 2 schools of thought. Some business leaders think of data as like this magical like oil that I can extract, and then it automatically turns into like business value on the other side. And while that is kind of true, it's not completely accurate. And then there's like this other school of thought where it's like, people view data as just like an experimentation process, almost like the scientific method of like running an experiment in my business, seeing what works. Oh, that didn't work. Now I'm going to try this, and now I'm going to try this. And they're using it as more of a tool of measuring and giving them feedback from that. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest things that I see.
So a question to add on to that then is if you're a startup and you want to try to prevent all the, you want to have better data hygiene, which is always every organization's challenge. What advice would you give the startup founder to at least get on the right foot from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think, so I'm a perfectionist, And like, I will take things to the nth level if I'm given too much time. So like forcing yourself to be with a constraint, and sometimes the constraint is time, like that works really, really well. So I would say, but I also really, really love the quote, I'm gonna botch it, but like Albert Einstein said, if I was given an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about how to solve it, and then I'd spend the last 5 minutes solving it. If you take the time to set up your business processes and identify like, well, what is the problem that we're solving in the marketplace, right? And how do we do that better than anyone else? Okay, great. What has to be true for us to be able to make this sale to this customer, right? And sometimes just asking them gets a really good response, right? But I would say taking the time to actually identify what are the business processes are, however simple they are, and then just taking the time to record it, right? You can even do this in a simple Google sheet or an Excel spreadsheet and just identify that and start there. That gives you something to look back at that's objective, that helps you reflect on your performance. So that's
Love
what I'd say.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Anything else? Oh. We'll get you in just a second.
Hey, John, thanks for the great information that you shared with us today. My question is going back to like the first step here, and you've kind of been talking about it, but on clean your data, how can AI help in that process? So I think that's maybe something that AI could be really good at, but like how do we as business operators or managers leverage AI to actually do the house cleaning needed to have a good data set?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one of the features on our roadmap is like making it easy for a business leader who's non-technical, and then I'll call it an admin who is more technical, giving both groups the right level of visual information to identify, and perspective to identify like, how dirty is my data? Like the business leader who doesn't have access to the systems, they just need like a metric. It's 30% clean, right? And like the admin level person, they need to see like which columns or which fields of data are the dirtiest, right? And they need to be able to identify that so they can go clean that up and go back to the people who entered the data to get the right information or not. In terms of getting AI to do it for you, I don't know, there's two schools of thought in my mind on that. One would be, first, I would probably just throw it at a traditional, depending on the size of the data, like a data analyst or a data engineer, and just have them look through. There's some very simple methods that you can employ to identify clean data and dirty data and how dirty each of those fields are. The second one is, once you've done that process, that is where I think I would start to show AI examples of poorly entered data, and you're showing it, in other words, like more and more examples of like, this record was wrong, this record was wrong, this record was good, right? And you have 1,000 records, 200 of them could be wrong for different reasons. And that's where I think you'll be able to see it. I don't want to mislead you. Like, I haven't personally built that into our product yet, but as we go through that process, I'm excited to see how it turns out. So, yeah.
This might be a repeat question, but I'm a data engineer. You don't need to convince me how dirty.
No, but I need to convince your boss.
Yes, no, I mean, yeah. I struggle to do that, I guess. But
yeah. Let me convince your boss. Here, we have this great website.
There you go. Yeah. So the cost to get to 100% clean data
not worth it.
Is
not worth it ever.
Astronomical.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So what are some guidelines or maybe some points where you could advise on like when do you know that your data is clean enough?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know that there's a number or a metric. I always go to the Pareto principle, like 20% of the data, 20% of the records, and 20% of the fields. Like Salesforce has, I don't even know how many fields, right? It's really 20% of those fields that people care about the most and that get queried the most, right? The other 80% are there in case something happens, right? And that's kind of the advent of what has happened over the past, call it, I don't know, couple of decades of building SaaS products, right? But good enough, I would say, is that you're able to answer the questions accurately and timely. Right? So and this is the trickiest part about data and doing anything that's a data-driven product, because data has like this nasty decay rate, where it's like you have to give the right person the right data at the right time. As we have started to learn, like we'll give someone an insight and they look at it and they're like, that's great, but it's irrelevant right now. Like I can't do anything about that. My quarter is closing next month. You just told me I'm off by a factor I can't come up with. So in terms of making sure it's good enough, right? Making sure that those calculations are able to be done correctly and quickly is, I would say, good enough. If you're constantly finding as a data engineer, or maybe you're supporting data analysts or data scientists who are downstream from you, that they're not able to get that quickly, that's when it's time to go through a cleansing process. In terms of preventing it, whoever is the admin or who controls that system of record, we've been using Salesforce as an example, like whoever the Salesforce admin is, like getting them to make sure that certain fields are required, not allowing certain fields to be free-form text, right? Forcing them to like fill those out and working with whoever the business leader is to make sure that that system of record or that business map is being adhered to. Like anytime someone can go around something, they will, right? And it's not like not calling people out for being like bad or like malicious, but like anytime you can, like in an emergency or like it's 11:59 on a Friday night, you don't want to be dealing with this problem anymore. You can subvert that situation. You're going to do it. So those are kind of the two ways that I would approach it. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, the mic's just
Bringing
moving
it from
down
the back
that row.
row here, yeah. As you look at, whether it's on your roadmap or not, as you look at the future of how AI is going to be implemented throughout small, medium business, where do you get the most excited? What do you see coming?
Yeah. I get really, really excited about the idea of agentic workflows. And what I'm learning in using AI systems in my own work and also in implementing it for other customers is that I think I get really, really excited about that. And then like the immediate blocker that I'm seeing is like trust. I actually don't think it's compute power, like unless you're building foundation models. I think the biggest thing is trust. Like we'll show someone an insight and the first thing they want to do is identify, like they want to figure out like how did you come to that conclusion? Like, where did that data come from? What was your logic? How did you get there? So we've built some things into our Slack bot that make it, you use a question mark emoji to respond to a question, and it'll spit out like the logic. Here's the steps. And we worked really hard to make sure that it was not spitting out the code that it used to generate it, because the average business user who uses our product, they don't care about that, and it's too much information sometimes. Even if they could, they don't want to see that. They want to see like the logical steps that it took. Oh, I took a sample of data from here and this data set, I joined them on this, and like just kind of walking them through it. Oh, and then I sorted by this column or something like that. So I think the thing I get the most excited about is that agentic workflow promise, so to speak. What I'm learning and building this for other people is you have to be able to show it to them in the right way where they trust it. So think of, I don't know if you've ever been in a room or presented like a data analysis for someone as a data scientist or a data engineer or even a data analyst. The first thing that you do as soon as you show a number and make a recommendation on what a business person should do next, the first thing that happens is you get like this, you get like court-martialed and subpoenaed into like, prove how you did this. Like, walk me through the logic. Where did you get that data, right? And then they will push you to the limit of until like, if they're convinced of something that you didn't consider, they want to know all the assumptions you made. Oh, okay, so you did not consider the fact that there was a tsunami in Tokyo and the butterfly whapping in Brazil, you know, the butterfly wings flapping in Brazil. You didn't factor that into your model? Garbage. Like, get out of my office, you know, that kind of thing. That's an extreme example, right? But like, people do the same thing with these AI agents when they produce like a recommendation. They want to know like, what were the assumptions that this agent made and how, what was the data that it used to base that assumptions on? So I actually think in order to get there, I think trust is going to be the biggest barrier. And like when you're building with AI, you have to make sure that you take that into account for whoever your stakeholder is, and like getting it back to the user at the right time. So like we use Google Workplace, and they just, like it or not, forced Gemini on everyone. And like I've messed around with like getting it to respond with emails. I really like that it asks me before I push send if I like it or not, right? I would hate it if it didn't let me edit the text before I hit send and use the recommendation. That's like an example where you're asking the user, like, is this correct? Do you like this? You know? So thinking about whatever that process is that you're doing with AI, I think that's the thing you have to think about to help your users gain trust. If that, hopefully that lands, but yeah.
Anything else? Okay, well, let's give a round of applause for John.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And appreciate the engagement and the good questions. That basically wraps it up for us. But again, you do have time if you want to do some networking, get to know some folks here. Also, you know, myself and Heather are here from the committee. So if you've got any ideas on things you'd like to see, anyone that wants to speak, we're always looking. And we're always looking for people to sponsor. So if you like to pay for pizza, let us know. But yeah, that's it. Again, thanks for the time. Thanks for showing up, and have a good week.